I'm not talking about, I want them to be educated, go to the best university, have them go to the best universities and have a very successful life. What is it that we really, really want for our children? So the way I think, the best way to think about it, to just close your eyes and think. Most of you, I think, have 4 and 5-year-olds or children under 5. When your child is an adult in the future, when she or he comes home, how would you like to see your child? What kind of qualities would you like to see in your child? And if you can answer that, that is what you're going to parent for. Parent for his life in future, what he would become in the future. That should be our parenting goal, in my humble opinion. So when we respond to our children, we need to always keep those two things in mind. What do I really want for this child? What would I like to see him or her be when she is an adult? What kind of qualities we have? I think if we can hold that in our hearts and in our minds, that perhaps will help us respond in the right way or most appropriate way. So when we talk about listening, our children listening to us and we listening to our children, I want to ask all the adults in the audience, obviously there are only adults I think here, the adults in the audience to think about when there was a situation when you were really, really upset, whether you were sad, hurt, angry, and you were really upset, and in whatever emotional way you were expressing that to your loved ones. So when you are that distraught, how would you like that loved one to respond to you? Number one, would you like them to say, oh, you know what? I think you should have done this. And I think this is the best way for you to respond. And this is what I think you should do. Or someone either touching you gently or giving you a hug and say, I see that you're really upset. I see that you're really hurting. I see that you're really angry. Do you want to tell me more about how you're feeling? I just want you to think about, because I can't see you guys and I can't see whether you're acknowledging what you might be thinking. I'm guessing most of you would like a little hug or a little gesture to say, to know that that person is asking you, how do you feel? And I recognize that you're feeling that. And that's exactly what our children need from us when they are having a temper tantrum, when they are angry, hurt, screaming, shouting. All at that point they need from you is to know that you are validating their feelings. Now, validating a child's feeling or anyone's feeling does not mean you're agreeing with them. There is a big difference. You don't need to agree with them, but you can validate their feelings. And that is something that's really, really important for us to remember, to validate. Once you validate it, and then when you acknowledge them and you agree with them that, yes, I know that you are feeling sad, hurt, angry, then that is a connection that you're making with them. Each child needs that connection. Every one of us needs that connection to say, hey, I belong. They are listening to me. And once you validate that, then you can go on to the next step and ask them, why do you think this happened? And what do you think we should do about it? So these things are really important in communicating with your child. So rather than telling, you want to be asking. There's a huge difference between telling and asking. And those are the two skills, the skills that you want to have is the skill of asking instead of telling. Very often we think a asking parent is a submissive parent. Actually, a telling parent is a submissive parent. I want to give you kind of an example. Let's say in Sri Lanka, your child, she's ready to go for her cricket practice. And then she comes to you and says, "Oh, Mom, I can't find my batting pads." Yeah, batting pads, right? I can't find my batting pads. I don't know where they are. And she's upset and, I can't find it. I have practice in 15 minutes. I don't know what to do. And parent A would say, "How many times has this happened? You're always losing everything, blah, blah, blah." And you go on and on and on. She gets into the car and it continues on and on and on and on. "But this time I will buy you the thing. But the next time you have another thing coming, go to your room," all that follows with that. And you buy her the batting pads anyway. So the child learns, all I have to do is to just listen to this lecture, take it from one ear, let it out of the other ear, but my mother or my dad will rescue me. So if I can listen to the lecture and if I can ignore it and if I can take it, then I will be rescued. I want you to think whether that is a life lesson. Would it stop the behavior right then and there because you're shouting and ranting and raving? Yes, it might. But would it change the child's behavior? You just have to think about it. Would it actually change your child's behavior? Second scenario, parent B who says, "Oh, I lost my batting pads. I'm upset." Say, "Yes, I can see that. I know you're very sad and you're very upset, and I'm sorry. So what should I do? Are you going to buy me another bat?" Or whatever that is, and say, "I'm sorry. I guess today you'll have to miss practice." And whatever comes out of that would be a learning experience. The child learns to take responsibility. He might not go for their practice that day, but it would be an opportunity to learn. So mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. So when you respond to your child, you want to always think of, do I want to stop that behavior then? Punishing, sending them to their room, giving them consequences will definitely stop their behavior at that time. There's no doubt. But would that behavior reoccur every time? Yes, because we're not giving them a chance to think about what they have done or empower them to make good choices. But if you do listen, and if you do validate, and if you do respond to change their behavior, then it might not happen overnight. They say it takes 7 days to change a behavior at least. I promise you, you will see a difference in their behavior. So it's about trusting that you can empower your child, and then you can change a child's behavior. It's how you respond to your child, whether you react or you proact. And I'm not telling you anything that I haven't tried, Most often I have failed as a parent while growing up. My son was growing up, and I see he's in the audience. But you try. And every time you make a mistake, you go back and you correct it yourself. So one of the skills that I think that we really need to have is the skill of observing and asking what happened and empowering the child for that. So I think I'm going to stop here, right, Charania? And let the other speakers speak, and we can take off from where we left if you have questions, and if we want to delve deep into other skills that we can apply to our parenting, we will go ahead and talk about it. But in closing, I just want everyone to know that parenting is the skill that you need to develop. It doesn't happen overnight. I think the most important thing for us to do is to connect with our children. And I think it's really, really helpful if you keep what I said in mind about how would you like to see your child in 20 years. If every time when you flip your lid and you blow up, always hold that in your heart. And I think that will lead you or sway you into the right kind of response that your child needs. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I did help you start thinking about parenting in a different paradigm or through a different paradigm. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deepa, for that. We've already got a couple of questions on it as well, which is great. So we're going to keep going and move on to our next speaker. I'm going to share my screen again so you can see her full bio. So Shamian Kulumbage is our next speaker. Shamian has started a teaching career in 1975. And she was trained in the Woodlands Training Center in Colombo. She's worked as a teacher in Nigeria, in Sydney, Australia, and then she returned to Sri Lanka in the 90s. And it was in the early 2000s that she set up Stepping Stones Montessori at Pitakote. She's also actively engaged in teacher training programs. She's an accredited kinder gym coach under Gymnastics Australia. And in 2014, she was awarded Woman Entrepreneur of the Year by the Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So Shamian also, again, someone with a great deal of experience, many years of dealing with early childhood education. And she is going to start speaking to us now. Shamian, over to you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you to the host for inviting me to be part of this discussion. My topic today is help me do it myself, a very commonly used phrase in the Montessori world. For those of you who are not too familiar with Montessori, Montessori is a very structured environment with its own specialized equipment. And the equipment in turn helps the children develop their emotional, social, and cognitive development. The phrase help me to do it myself in itself describes a developing of independence and freedom, which is what we encourage totally in a Montessori classroom. So to look at this in this time of pandemic, where most of us, and especially to young moms, young parents with young children, it is a trying time. And I'd like to have a look at how we can bring some of the Montessori ideas and thinking into your homes. So I've just taken 3 points I'd like to break it up into. The first point is to, I think you need to give your child a role in the family. And when I say a role, when I'm talking about a role, I mean a part of the day-to-day chores. So it could be simple activities like sweeping some part of the house. It could help unload the dishwasher, maybe help bringing the washing from the line and folding it. These are all little, I could give you lots more ideas, but these are little chores that the child could be involved in. And in these activities, there is also an element of learning. For instance, he could be counting, he could be sorting things out, he could be recognizing colors. In many ways, that is the conventional sort of learning. But what is really happening here is the child is beginning to feel a sense of responsibility, a sense of independence, and the trust that you have shown in the child that he's entrusted with these activities builds his confidence. So in doing this, I think you are also always allowing your child the space to do it himself. Some shows might need your help, but by and large, he's working and doing it himself. The second point is something Deepa spoke about quite extensively, and that is communication. So in times like this, I think, we, in a sense, we have more time because we are at home and our busy day of rushing around has decreased. But ask yourself, how much time do you really spend communicating with your child? Find a time, a quiet space where you can really have a chat with your child. Give him the space to be able to express himself. This is a time where he can improve his vocabulary, express ideas. And also, just like us adults having anxieties and concerns about this time, I really believe children do have certain anxieties. And they may not have had the opportunity to express it to you. So this would be an ideal setting to talk about it. It could be happy times, happy things that he discusses and wants to let you know that he enjoyed it. It could be opening a time for you to repeat those happy times, those happy activities. So communication is a very important aspect of parenting, as Deepa said. Also, I think music is such a wonderful way to enhance communication. So if you were to play music at a time, it doesn't have to be just children's music, it could be classical music. You could be encouraging him to listen to music from different parts of the world. And often music inspires even children to be able to express themselves more openly and more wantingly, more keenly. So this would be a setting, I think, in a time when you are chatting with your child, that you could also include listening to music. The third point that I think, and is probably my pet subject in the classroom as well, is the outdoor experience. I think nature is such an important part of learning. And unfortunately, in most children's lives, they don't engage with nature because of our busy schedules, lack of space. But really, talking about people, even if you live in a condominium and your space is restricted to a balcony, there's still opportunities for your child to nurture plants in pots. It could be growing vegetables. It could be a creeper that's growing along the balcony. And here again, you're entrusting the child to nurture the plant, something living, something that he's watching growing. And it also gives him a sense of time. It could be he waters the plants every morning. The sheer joy of discovering its growing, or the realization that it can die. And that too is another big part of learning. So nature, I mean, and then if you do have the space to step outdoors, just weeding or digging the ground is also a point of the child realizing the connectedness of the whole universe. The need that when he's digging, he might find a little worm creeping up. And then the realization that this is the worm's home. I've had children who have picked up snails from the garden and brought them into the classroom. And here there is always the lesson of being gentle. So there is coordination required, that they don't squash it in their hand and they gently put it back to its surroundings. So nature is another place where you could be working in this time at home with your child and giving him that responsibilities while he is making so many observations and learning, opening doors for you to have conversations about, finding interests. Nature is one place that the children find fascinating because they discover symmetry of a leaf, and the whole, a tree, while it's may not be symmetrical, its whole formations, its shapes. These are all parts of things that nature encourages children's learning. So I could go on with lots more points, but time, of course, is a constraint. I just like to close with a little story. We talked about, or I spoke about their engagement and their time spent close to nature, but mostly at daytime. But some weeks ago, when I was visiting my son's family, my 2-year-old little grandson, it was a full moon day. And he was so fascinated with the moon. And it must have been 10 times that he kept taking me to the window and pointing to the moon and calling it the moon and asking me to have a look at it. And thinking back on it later, I realized this little child was so fascinated with the moon for what? I mean, I think in many ways I would never really understand his total fascination, but certainly the obvious things like its brightness, its shape, its size, its placing, and probably noticing the clouds going over it and then what happened. So these are things that often we take so much for granted in nature, and we don't spend time with our children, giving them the opportunity to observe these. Because all this is a big part of their learning. So I think in closing, I'd like to stress to you that in this time that we are living in, one of the biggest ways is that most parents, I think, are spending time doing activities. We in schools have sent study packs, which is all wonderful, but I think it is very important that your child understands that he has a vital role to play in this family, and that he is a very valued, trusted person in, and that whatever work he's given, it is given with trust to help him believe that he can do it and give him the opportunity to do it himself. the trust that you place on him that he can do it is in turn going to build a lot of confidence and the interest in doing things to a finish, for instance. So I think this is a subject that we can go on with lots of points, but as I said, time is of the essence. So I'd be happy to take questions on this topic or related to this topic as to how you empower your child with the phrase, help me to do it myself. That is to give him the freedom to do things by himself and to in turn to help him to develop a spirit of independence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shamian. I think it's really interesting that both you and Deepa drew in what I think is a common element which both of you talked a lot about, looking at the child as an individual and thinking of the child as an actual person and not sort of somebody with all of the complexities and all of the different traits and different environmental ideas that anybody else would have, and not just sort of a copy cut paste. And parenting can't be, like you said, a copy cut paste. It's about empowering this individual child. We've got some questions in, but before we take them on, I just wanted to ask both of you to respond to this one thing that we can kind of help bring and open up the question and answer segment, to have more and more people ask questions, because we've got quite a few. I wanted to ask you both that a lot of parents feel that in this pandemic, that their stress is greater. Some of them, especially mothers, are working from home, managing the home as well, having to deal with now a full-time job of a teacher. Previously, they would have sent possibly to one of your schools and the child is out for 4 or 5 hours. And perhaps that stress tends to bleed onto the child because there may be parents listening to you saying, well, that's nice, that sounds nice in theory, especially as both of you have finished raising your children. But I'm trying to manage my job and I'm trying to make sure dinner is on the table and source groceries. And now you want me to sit and have a conversation with my toddler. And sometimes I don't have the time for that. I'm going to ask Deepa to go first, and then Shamian, if you can respond as well. What is your response to parents who feel that, especially in this pandemic, there's a lot of stress and a lot of additional burdens on them? And now what you're saying just feels sometimes like an additional burden, instead of running to the tried and tested methods of just saying, be quiet, being a little bit more firm and doing old school parenting as our parents would have told us. Don't pander to your child is kind of, you touched a bit on this, Deepa, but I'll ask for you to respond first and then Shamian can follow through.
Often when we talk about parenting, we go to extremes of the pendulum and say, if you are a good, so-called good attentive parent, that means you have to devote most of your time with your child, and that you don't have any time for yourself, or you can't do other things. That is a mistake. Make saying that if I don't devote all my time or most of my time with my child, then I'm guilty of not paying attention to the child. That is not what parenting is about. A family is a unit where each individual has different jobs. And a child needs to grow up knowing that mom has her time, dad has her time, mom needs to cook. We have, mom has a time to do her work. So it is really important, really quickly. I mean, I can do a whole lecture on this, but real quickly to answer your question is, I think there has to be structure. There has to be, again, communication with your child, with your better half, to say, okay, this time is going to be mommy and me time. You and I are going to sit down and read a book. And children like to know what's coming up. So in 10 minutes time, we're going to do this together. In 10 minutes time, mom's going to go cook. Or in 10 minutes time, I need to go do my work. So what would you like to do? Would you like to sit down next to me and read a book, or would you like to do this? And then give them the assurance of, okay, when I finish this, what would you like to do together? And then go back and connect. So it's all about connecting, all about validating. And a child who's throwing a temper tantrum and saying, no, I want to do this now, instead of saying that, no, didn't you hear me? I just said I have to do this. Instead of that, I hear you. I hear that you want to read a book with me, and I will. Guess what? We will do that, but right after I finish cooking. So until that, what can you do? What can we do? You know, just to give you an example. So there are things that you can do to set the stage right, where that you can help your child feel that confidence. Mom and dad are there for me when I need them, but they also have their individual time. Very often what we do is we think that we need to be there all the time. So that's why we're frustrated and we're anxious, because we think it's bad parenting if we don't jump when our child says jump. So, you know, just to give you an example, I hope that kind of directs you guys in the right direction, and then we can go on some more and another time. Okay.
Thanks, Deepa. Shaman, do you want to jump in here just to add to what Deepa said?
Topic of help me do it myself, which I particularly chose this topic because I think exercising these thoughts and helping your child to be part of your day-to-day chore is very possible in this particular time we are living through, where you can actually, if for instance you're cooking dinner, your child can be very much a part of it, that you can allow him to chop up vegetables. You could help him to ask him to scrape the coconut for you. You know, little chores around the kitchen, which I know I have seen children do absolutely professional jobs with cutting and chopping once they have been given the safe tools and the encouragement that they can do it. There's so much more than actually we realize a little child is capable of doing. So the more work you allow the child to be involved in your daily chores, that change in your lifestyle can also help you cope. And as Deepa said, you don't have to feel that throughout the day we have to structure it to cater your child. Your child is now fitting in to the family's routine. Of course, there will be certain times you will take out of it that you will predominantly spend with your child, reading stories or listening to music, as I said. But I think a greater part of the day, the child can be a part of it, helping you.
Great, thank you so much. I think those were really insightful responses. Going off that vein, Deepa, this question came in particularly when you were speaking. It's a couple of parents who run a parenting page called Parenting with Metta, and they talk a lot about these issues. But this
Parenting with what?
Parenting with Metta, it's a Buddhist word of compassion, and
Okay.
you know, so they talk a lot about, you know, these issues. And one of the questions they had was that, so I'm reading out the question. It says, we raise our son to be kind and compassionate. Some parents ask us, but will that make him weak when he faces the wild world? Would he be strong enough to handle the battles? We do have our response, but would like to know your views on raising a child to be kind and compassionate. Deepa, would you like to respond, given that was your area when you were speaking?
So kind and compassionate, or having empathy, does not mean that he needs to be weak. And is that the word that we're using? Weak? When a child, so let me see how I can answer that. A child who is very confident within himself a child who can see another child's pain, or another person's pain, or have empathy, that child already has to have a really good sense within himself. I don't think it is possible for any individual to feel compassion, to feel empathy, to be kind, unless they feel that inside. So to build something like that, obviously the parent has done that inner work where they have given that confidence to that child, given that core value, saying that you are okay, you're fine, and who you are is good enough. And you can be kind, you can be empathetic, you can be compassionate, and yet be yourself, yet have that core value. I don't think it's possible to be kind and empathetic and compassionate if you don't have a core value and a really good identity of yourself. So if you think your child is kind, compassionate, and empathy, you've done a really good job raising your child. Because I don't think a weak child, or quote unquote, because I don't think there are weak children. I think children always develop. It's for us to develop them. But if a confident child can only exude that. So
Thank you, Deepa.
hopefully that explains a little bit.
Shamian, I'm going to direct the next question to you. It's a question on tackling frustration in toddlers when they're trying to do things by themselves but are not able to. This leads to anger and not willing to let us help them. How does one tackle this frustration?
Actually, it is about timing. Because if you observe a little child who is trying to do a particular activity and he's so intent on getting it right, it's necessary we give him the space. But it's all about timing, because in the Montessori classroom, we see this happen often. And as adults, as teachers, we have to control ourselves not to intervene and help the child before he needs the help. So if you watch your child at the activity and then there is a point at which frustration starts to build up, and that's when I think you need to time yourself and gently ask the child, would you like me to help you? And do just one little part of the activity so that the child you still retain the interest in the activity. You don't take everything away. You just help him to start it and then hand it back to the child. And just keep going step by step. If he still needs help, you come in. But not to do the entire exercise, because then you take away the sheer joy in the child of feeling that sense of accomplishment. I hope that answers some of it. It's a difficult time, but it is also a lot to do with your timing, at which time you step up to help the child.
Great, thank you so much, Shamian. The next question I'm going to direct to Deepa. It talks about expertise on kids getting addicted to technology or digital devices, particularly during this pandemic. How does a parent handle that?
So, so depending on how you at home are using the device, so I think you have to ask yourself, am I using the device as a babysitter? Am I using the device as where a child can learn knowledge or have some entertainment? I'm not the one to say that TV is all bad or devices are all bad. I think there's a lot of value in it. I think, especially in our times and in our children's times, that is a very valuable tool. And I'm learning what a great tool it is, especially when you have to socially distance yourself. So it's about limiting the device. And I think you can set a time aside that this would be the time for entertainment, or say half an hour, you can do this, and then let's go out and play or do something else for that time. So I think it has to be structured. See, very often, everything that we're talking about, I'd like our audience and our parents to understand it's not something that you can snap your finger and change it overnight. These are old habits, and people, parents, when they ask things, what can we do? It's a gradual change. So from A, you can't go to Z. So if your child is used to watching 2 hours of television or being on a device for 2 hours, all of a sudden you can't go to 0 and say, okay, put that away. And very often we either are in this extreme or the other extreme. So you do need to set a time up. There has to be structure, and you have to see what is best for your family, how much devices he's spending on, time he's spending on the device, and limit it if you think it's too much and that's the only thing he's doing or she is doing, then that's too much. But if they're going outside and playing, and if they're doing sports, and if you are engaged in some kind of game in the family, like Charmaine said, he's involved in helping you doing something, those are things that a parent needs to create in your daily schedule. Those are things that you need to create. So it is up to the adult to create it. But if you're just all the time saying that, don't do this, don't do that, and then not giving them alternative choices, because these are little children, and just saying, don't do this is not going to help. But if you can actually show them there's something more interesting, let's play a family game, or let's do that. That would be the way to go about it, as I think.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's a very pertinent question, given that in this pandemic, even we as adults are taking on a lot more digital time and a lot more digital consumption than would be usual. So I think that was a really great question. Charmaine, the next question is for you. It says, I am the mom of a 4-year-old boy. My child is not interested in drawing and handwork. How can I create an interest in him towards these activities?
Okay, so I think there's a lot of activities in a Montessori classroom. We call it the practical life. And again, it brings me back to this topic of help me do it myself and the current situation that we are all living in, where children have access to doing home chores, which also require a fair bit of coordination. So children become interested in drawing or writing when they've got the right coordination skills. And it can be not just fine motor skills. As a kinder gym coach, when I did my training in Sydney, I discovered the connection between Montessori and the kinder gym was quite strong because there I realized that even the gross motor skills were very connected to the fine motor skills, or writing, handwriting, and speech. Lots of children who came to us who had speech delays, I found had not done the usual gross motor activities of growing up, for instance, crawling, which is a very vital part of development. And some kids just miss out. They don't crawl, straight away sit down and then pull themselves up to stand and walk. And then we have a misconception of thinking that he was very fast, but actually he missed out a vital part of the development, the brain development. So if your child is a very active child, maybe you do exercises with him that will focus more on his balance. Maybe see if we can cope with height. Sometimes active children don't really like height. So climbing up, unfortunately, we don't have access to playgrounds at this time. But see what way you can incorporate him climbing a ladder, say at home, to reach something. And most of all, balance, which is something you can always create inside the home. Just walk along a line. You draw a line with a piece of chalk and ask the child to walk heel to toe on that and keep a slow pace. That will really encourage his balance. If you work on those skills, you might find that he finds the coordination that is required then to bring it to his fine motor skills, and then in turn bring it to his writing. So you don't need to be too stressed and rush for it. Try to entice him to do things like threading beads or cutting things, cutting out shapes with the scissors, using a sponge for activity. These are all enticing his fine motor skills, which then might encourage him to get interested in holding a pencil, or you can start with things like crayons. And entice him to do drawings that he chooses. It could be a subject that he likes. I hope that gives you some idea.
Great, thank you so much, Shamian. We actually have about another 1 to 4 questions more, and we're 3 minutes out. So we are going to go a little over time. We're going to extend this for 10 minutes. Those of you who have to leave, we understand you are parents and you have blocked out your time from 10 to 11. So we are going to try and share some clips, but if you can stay, especially if you've asked these questions, it would be really great. So just a time warning that we are going to go a little over time. Deepa, the next question I'm directing to you, it's actually from the Mums in Colombo forum. They ask that one of the issues many women on our forum have is the lack of participation from the father, which becomes very obvious when everyone is home 24/7. Are there easy ways to get fathers involved without stressing the relationships?
$1 million question, right? Okay, how would I address that? That is a conversation very often, which is true, that working parents and at this time, mothers tend to do most of the work. And I'm sorry, I think is this involving parenting with the child, or involving just with the household chore? I think
given that this is the parenting forum and we're focusing on parenting, I think let's talk about co-parenting as much as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of parenting. I think in what one has to do is we need to sit down. I think mom and dad have to sit down, assuming that that's the family that we're talking about, have to sit down and bring into conversation. Again, it's the same thing that we apply to the child, right? Sit down and express how you feel and how that the things that you feel are making you stressed out, and asking for help. I think one way to address it is not pointing out and ranting and raving, and like most of us do when we are stressed out, to say, you don't do a thing, I have to do everything. that again shuts down the other person. So I think it would be a great way to approach it is, I'm feeling frustrated. It's always an I message than a you message. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overwhelmed. How can you help me? That would be a good starting point. We can talk more about it. We can go on, but I think that would be a very good starting point, a point to tell someone how you feel rather than being accusatory and saying that, you know, you're not doing anything, as versus that I need help. Can you please help me? What do you think you can do to help me? And go from there. Each individual relationship in a family is different. So it's very difficult to tailor it when a question is asked like that, unless I know exactly what's going on in that particular family. Each individual is different. So generally, this brings more success when you ask for help rather than you demand help, if that makes sense. And I need to practice that some more. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Deepa. That was going to be my next question is, I wonder if your husband would agree. But I guess that's
Well,
a million
yeah,
dollar question for all of us.
yeah, that's $1 million question. It's hard to walk the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Shamia, next question is going to be directed to you. It says, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, both boys. Can you suggest a brief itinerary for them during this time, unlike during their school days?
Okay. So there are certain things I'm sure the 4 and 6-year-old can do together. If it is, I mean, we're talking about things they could do around the house. You could possibly get them involved in the garden. There are things, lots of things a 4 and 6-year-old could be doing. That you could just give them ideas, maybe discuss with them about starting a veggie plot where there is a lot of responsibility involved, and the 6-year-old could be doing the more difficult tasks. They could be doing, you know, activities. I'm sure they do play together, but activities around the house, look to see what you think they can do together. For instance, one of the activities I've found lots of parents say really works nicely is setting the dinner table and then washing up after them. And the 6-year-old would be able to do that, providing you give him a height to stand up at the sink. So these are little shows that they could be involved in the day-to-day activities. Apart from their, you know, playing together, which is something obviously you are having them do, but something I felt that is around the home would give them, again, that sense of contributing to the home and making a difference. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Shamin. I think those are really useful insights, especially tying back to what you said earlier about including the child as a part of your routine and as a part of the house, and making the child feel like they're a valuable member of this family that contributes to the family unit. I think is really an important part. Okay, we're down to our last 2 questions. So Deepa, this is the last one for you. Um, it ties back to some of the things you talked about earlier. It says, my little one is 2.5 years old and has trouble following instructions sometimes. I guess it depends on her mood. I understand that she's growing up and is growing to be independent, but I'm afraid it would affect her relationship with her educators in preschool. How do I handle this?
Okay, so a 2.5-year-old is just going from being a toddler to a 3-year-old. She's going from a what we call an egocentric mode to where she can really understand what others are feeling. So not being able to follow directions all the time is very normal for a 2.5-year-old. You cannot expect a 2.5-year-old to follow directions every time. There are sometimes they can, because it's about abstract thinking. They're very concrete, and when you give them, ask them things to do, they cannot translate that into abstract thinking and follow you all the time. There is this, in child psychology, there is that the children under the age of 3 can follow your directions some of the time. In Montessori, we call that the 3 levels of obedience. And then when they're a little bit older, they can follow directions most of the time. So you always want to keep that in mind. And then, of course, your child's personality also in mind. So you want to choose the battle, choose your battles. I think you would have heard about that phrase. What is important for you, for her to follow you? There are certain things that are routines that are important. When you can give her a choice or him a choice, do give a choice. And sometimes when you do give choice, you will see that they are more willing to cooperate with you. So even if it's a choice of, oh, you can have this dress, you can wear a dress today, and they say, no, I don't want to wear this, but what color would you like to choose? Would you like to choose the pink one or the red one? It's kind of distraction, but at that age, distraction is a great tool because they don't usually understand your request all the time. And I don't think you should be worried about her going to, when they go to preschool. One of the things we hope is that all the teachers or the preschool that you're sending to, they're all educated in child development, and they will know how to handle her if she has issues not following directions. So I wouldn't worry about that too much.
Great, thank you so much, Deepa. The final question for Shamian is that it's about writing. And it says a lot of preschool stress on writing.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not sure what's going on. Is that your...
I'm sorry, Sharanya, I seem to have lost my sound, my speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
So the question was about writing, was it? Okay, can I go ahead and answer it?
Okay.
Yeah, so there is no real hard and fast rule on what age we start writing. It is a time when children are ready for it and they show definite interest in writing. Mostly, of course, that you can help them with their pencil grip, and that is to give them lots of activities, with, whether it's their toys or chores around the house, to develop their hand-eye coordination, which in turn then helps them to hold a pencil. That's the starting point. And then, of course, when we first start handwriting, there are exercises we would follow, then eventually lead to gradually forming the letters. But I'm really very much a believer that we shouldn't be rushing handwriting, because if you rush your child to write before they're really ready, the whole joy of writing is taken out of it, because there's so much of stress on forming the letters and dotting the I and crossing the T sort of thing happening, that in their later years, or even by the time they're 5 and they are into creative writing, their whole writing, the joy of writing is taken out, so the creativity is also destroyed. So it's more important to not stress a child about forming letters properly, but to give him the tools to find the skills and get his hand-eye coordination right so that he's comfortable of the letters. Because as I said, if you stress them with handwriting too early, their creative writing in later life is going to be stunted.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Shamian. Thank you so much, everyone. That is, we are actually at time. There are, questions we can keep asking, and I think we can have this conversation forever, but we do have to wind up. So thank you firstly so much to our speakers. Thank you for your time, and for, we've got great feedback on the chat. People have been saying this has been really insightful. They hope there'll be more discussions in the future like this. They really appreciate professional speakers with detailed answers to the questions. So thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to share my screen one last time and remind you that you can stay in touch with us. You just need to email everystory.srilanka@gmail.com. Many of you have already, who registered for the webinar, received our emails about details. So we're going to be doing more webinars. We hope to have more products and lots of different things. And I just want to thank the speakers, because I think, especially as Sri Lankans, it's so great to have people who understand our culture, who have Sri Lankan experts sharing it with our parents, because often we do get experts from different cultures who do talk to us, but it's really great to, Sri Lankan and South Asian speakers speaking to each other, because you definitely understand the culture and the particular context in which we raise our children. So thank you so much for everyone for joining. Have a great weekend, and please keep in touch with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Charmaine.